Welcome to the TREPX Podcast. TREP is short for entrepreneur. One of the most meaningful and rewarding, yet difficult challenges you can take on. The TREPX Podcast gives you actionable insights, real examples, and success X factors from experienced entrepreneurs as we are learning, living, and sharing in the exciting endeavor of entrepreneurship. Now here's your fellow entrepreneurial traveler and host, Mickey Deming.
Hey, welcome to the TREPX Podcast. This is Mickey Deming, and if you are listening to this, you are likely an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of things to think about. So I am always appreciative for the people who take the time to listen to this, whether it's on the drive, working out, or while working at the desk. I don't know how you take it in, but I really appreciate it. And if you are an entrepreneur, you're also constantly thinking, how can I grow my business? How can I get clients? And how can I turn this into something bigger than what it currently is? And what prevents us from doing that a lot of times comes down to clarity. Do we really know where we're trying to go? And then it comes down to systems. How do we take what we're doing for people and make it repeatable and profitable and predictable so you can do it again and again, and you can plug in others to deliver on that, and so it turns into something bigger than yourself. And so that's exactly what this interview is about. It's something that is easier said than done, but it can be done. And I had an opportunity to meet this interviewee, Jason Swenk, at an event that he spoke at, and then we got a chance to chat, and I decided to have him on the podcast. He is a wealth of information. He does most of his work with agencies to help them grow, but the principles apply to really any business because it has a lot to do with exactly what I just said, clarity and communicating clearly and creating systems and generating leads consistently. And Jason has a lot of tips on that and a lot of cool resources to give away for you that he'll share at the end. But to learn more about Jason, you can see his website at jasonswenk.com. Swenk is spelled S-W-E-N-K. Grab some of his free stuff. He's a wealth of information that he gives away for free. Very, very helpful, and was a joy to interview. So I think you're going to enjoy this. You can check out the interview at trepxgroup.com/podcasts, and you'll have links to all his good stuff in the show notes. So I really appreciate Jason coming on and taking the time, and thanks to you, the listener, again, for joining us on the TREPX Podcast. So please enjoy this interview with Jason Swenk. Hello, Jason. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, man. Doing great.
Hey, it's great to chat. I got a chance to see you speak a few weeks ago in Phoenix, and I was like, I got to interview this guy because I think your message in what you're doing with agencies is really going to be helpful for this audience. And so I want to start there in just the fact that that's the niche you've identified. You do a lot of work with digital agencies, helping them grow, which there's a huge need out there. But how'd you land on that? What led you to starting this brand and working with agencies like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the biggest thing was that's all I knew. That's the easiest way, right? But I guess maybe in 1999 I founded an agency and grew it over 12 years and sold it. And so after I sold it, I was kind of lost. I didn't know what I needed to do. And I saw these guys, making money online and working from home and really having the lifestyle. And, I started putting a blog together and I was like, what can I do? And I just couldn't find my niche. I couldn't find my specialization. And it kind of hit me in the face, a couple of years ago. And ever since, I'm glad it hit me in the face.
Interesting. So you started your agency in 1999. I'm sure lots changed in what it takes to succeed.
A little bit.
But I'm sure, a lot of the principles are probably the same. So for you, how long did it take? Basically, are you helping people with the same mistakes you made early on, or did you kind of naturally figure it out right off the bat?
And I made a million mistakes, and yeah. So, when people start working with me or they use my site as a resource, it's putting together the information I wish I had or someone told me, because there's so many landmines and pitfalls that you're going to fall in that you just can't possibly do it yourself. And so, my loss, your guys' gain, right?
Right, that makes sense. And I think there's a concept of the agencies, a lot of times it's like, I have this skill set and I want to help people, with that skill set. And there's a lot of problems in that because
number one, you're selling yourself. Number two, it's a lot of times trading time for money. And, you have to market the business and you also have to deliver on the business. So can you talk through kind of your just big picture mindset on an agency and like how people should approach it, who think this is the route they want to go?
Yeah, well, it works for really any service-based business. It's all about having the right systems in place, because at the end of the day, systems outperform talent all day long. And the only difference between where you're at currently and where you want to go, or someone at the level of where you want to go, is the systems that they have in place. It's not that they're smarter. I know, like, I've worked with a lot of people, really big companies, from the biggest brands in the world. They're definitely not smarter than us. Mm-hmm. It's all about the right systems, and you have to kind of start off with the foundation. And the two kind of systems, or the foundational systems that you really need, is having clarity. Because all of us kind of jump into the business and not have an idea of where we want to take it, or what we want to create, right? Like, my whole goal now is to be the number one resource in the world for agency owners. That's it. So that's my clarity. I know I make decisions based on that. And then the next foundational system that you need is have a specialization. Too many people start off going, I want to help everybody and I don't want to, eliminate anybody. But if you don't, you're eliminating so many people. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Totally, because, you're a good example. So the things you teach and the things you talk about, like you said, they would be applicable to any service-based business. Like, we're an accounting firm, and I learned a ton from your talk. Well, we wouldn't consider ourselves an agency, but you've done that to be, specialized, to speak that language. And that's,
you got it.
I'm guessing that's kind of how you've applied it.
Yep, you got it. Now, there are some things that are very specific to agencies, but in general, right, it's kind of like, everybody kind of starts looking at the big guy and they go, we need to do everything that they're doing. But they didn't model, or they should be modeling how they got there. Kind of like, I always use the example of Facebook. They didn't start off marketing to everybody, right? They didn't want to be the social network for everybody, the whole world, which they have become, right? They start off with Harvard, and then Ivy League schools, and then colleges, and then branched on to, old people like me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we finally got invited into the club. That makes perfect sense. And so with that in mind, and I like that you said, systems outperform talent, and I think that's what it comes down to when you're trying to build something that's bigger than yourself. And so cycling back now to these agencies you work with, and maybe where you were at in 1999, it usually takes a lot of, learning the hard way before those systems get into place. And I think the place where people start is, I need to get clients. I need to serve clients, and I need to just, get some business in the door and then figure it out. Where do people go wrong in how they approach adding clients, adding leads, and then serving them?
Yeah. Well, it's all about knowing who you're going to go after, right? So if you guys are listening and you guys fish, or even if you don't fish, the same principles apply. You first need to know, what type of fish are you going after? Because once you know what type of fish, then you know what kind of bait to use. And then you know what kind of location to go to. So if you're fishing for a blue marlin and you brought bait for a small little brim or trout, which is, maybe 1 or 2 pounds versus 1,000 pounds, right? You're not going to catch them. Or if you go to a pond to catch a whale, there are no whales in a pond. So you really have to think, who am I going after? And then the bait is really, what is their biggest desire, or what is their biggest problem of how I can help them? And whenever, like, I was chatting with someone yesterday, they go, I looked at your website and you give away everything. And they're like, well, how do you make money? They just think I'm a drug dealer, I guess. I don't know. And I said, well, the easiest way to prove to someone that you can help them is actually helping them. So once you identify their biggest challenge, do some videos, do some resources, do podcasts like you're doing to actually help them build trust and authority, and then you create this raving community. And then when you have something to offer, you just offer it, and they just come running. It's really as easy as that, but people make it so complex.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like but where people, I don't think they understand what that problem is. Do you think that's the thing? Like people start with themselves, like what can I do? And then how can I sell that rather than starting with the problem?
Yeah, dude, they focus too much on themselves. They're too into themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than focus on their prospect. Right? If you go to my site, if you go to jasonswenk.com, you see questions all over the darn place. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I want to focus. What do questions do? They focus on the person looking or reading the questions versus saying, I am the best. I am this. I got this award. We work with this client. It doesn't matter, right? It's kind of like, would you like to do something cool without doing something that sucks? Mm-hmm. That's basically how all my headlines work.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm looking at one right now. Would you like me to map out a blueprint that will show you how to create a lead generation system? So if someone wants that, then they're going to resonate, and then there's a video that kind of gives like a 1-minute explanation of what that looks like. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I like what you're saying too with like taking it off yourself, the focus, because the next question I was going to really lead into is having to do with pricing. I think that's probably the cycle most people go through is, they work for a couple of years and they start to get some momentum and then they're like, holy crap, I'm not charging nearly enough. This isn't going to work. No. But I think that ties right in. Like when you are thinking only about yourself, you're like, oh, I can't charge that much, or I feel like I'm, it's so arrogant to charge that way rather than focusing on the problem. What's that worth? Is that really how you approach the pricing also?
Yeah. So let me ask a question to the audience, which they can't answer, but they're all going to say yes. They're all going to be nodding their head in a second. So if you constantly tell yourself or tell people that you're too busy, which everybody should be nodding yes, then you're not charging enough, right? So it's never a pricing issue. People don't decide to not work with you for your service because of your price. Okay, it's not a pricing issue, and I can prove it. There was one person that was kind of full of it when I told them this, and they were like, I would ask. I was like, and when I tell you, you'll think, yeah, this person's crazy. But if you're about to have a heart attack, you are about to die, and the doctor says, we need to operate to save your life, are you going to ask how much it is? This one person was like, yeah, I'm going to ask. I'm like, you're an idiot. I was like, goodbye, right? But, you're going to figure it out after. So it's an urgency issue. And so you haven't demonstrated or discovered their urgency. You haven't asked the right questions in order to determine what their problem is, what's the impact on their business, and how important is it to them. So then you're selling on value versus price. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, it makes perfect sense, and I like that. That I'll use that in the future. It's true. I mean, people, if price is really the stumbling block, then that's not really the stumbling block. That's just not valuable enough to them. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And here's another thing, and this is what I learned from. I'm not a Navy SEAL, but this is what I learned from Navy SEALs. Okay, they have a rule called 40%, the 40% rule. Okay, and it's basically whenever you think you reached your cap, your body, your mind can still go another 60%. Right? It's kind of like the same principle when you're running a marathon, or I did an Ironman. I hit the wall so many darn times, right? Mm-hmm. But you just keep pushing through because you realize you still have so much more in the reserves. So if you feel like you've reached your cap on your pricing, you're only at 40%.
That's interesting. I like that. Yeah, I've heard from people too, like you always need to have a next level. Like always have a next level to sell because someone will want it, if they're loving it. And so I want, let's talk about how we can give some of that value away now and help people. Cause I like this, we were describing like you give stuff away for free, but then it transitions into sales. And I think the challenge for a lot of, agencies or service businesses that are newer is balancing that short-term versus long-term. And, the systems, that's a long-term thing. And the giving away for free and knowing that, like, if I keep giving value, then it'll pay off in the long run. But then there's the short-term that's like, I need to make a sale right now. How do you, in your lead generation kind of game plan, how do you balance the short-term and the long-term, and what do you tell people to focus on?
So you never focus in the short term. If you make decisions based on the short term, it's going to be short-term results. And you're just going to be constantly back. Like you're always on the hamster wheel, okay? You just want to make that hamster wheel bigger so it looks like you're walking on flat earth, right? Because you get off the hamster wheel, you die. You stop moving, right? You always got to be moving forward. And so you really need to just keep kind of pushing along. And so here's what I do, right? So you need to create this lead generation machine that really keeps giving you more and more leads, right? And so as you get more and more leads, you can get pickier and pickier. And you use technology and marketing automation in order to weed out the wrong prospects for you, right? Not saying they're bad people. They're just not the right prospect for you, right? Because I have a belief that there's no bad client. There's only a bad prospect or a bad process. And so you can weed them out. So basically you bring them in to this particular campaign, and then you see how they interact with it. Do they watch the video? Do they download the resource? If they don't do that, then you have a contingency, and you move them on to the next milestone. It's kind of a concept I've developed called milestone marketing, where you break like most people just have like an ebook, and then you download the ebook, and then you try to sell them something really quick, right?
Right.
But you got to think about what are all the logical decisions that person needs to make in order to do work with you or work with you. And there are multiple milestones in there. They first have to opt in. They first have to engage with the video. They then have to fill out a form that they're interested. Then they have to chat with you. They have to schedule a call with you, right? And so you use technology in order to do this. And that's really how, if you start just thinking of all the decisions they need to make and just work your way backwards from them becoming a client and go backwards.
Yep, that's fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I think what you said with focusing, you never focus on the short term. It makes perfect sense. Like the more leads you get, which that's a long-term goal is to generate these leads, the more selective you can be and the more valuable you're going to find people.
Yeah.
I want the listeners to really hear that, is like do the long-term thing, because the short-term is just going to get you short-term results and it's going to frustrate you in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, you'll start taking on the wrong clients. And we all have done it. I've done it so many times. You'll be like, oh man, I should not take on this client, but I really need to make payroll. And you do it, and then it winds up sucking more money down the line. It hurts your long-term outcomes that you want, right? So you really need to build these systems so you don't have to worry about the short term, right? What you do today should be affecting what you do 90 days from now, in 6 months, and a year, right? You just need that clarity of what that looks like.
Yeah, totally. And I want to take that to the next level with the systems, because systems, I think, is something that we hear it and we're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I need to get systems in my business, and that makes perfect sense. But then when it comes to actually implementing that and doing it, it's like, no, I'll just do it myself, or I'll just do it the hard way, because it's so hard to turn that into something that actually doesn't require me to do it all the time. So how do you take people through that? Like, I know you may not do it for them, but like, what's the mindset you teach people to approach systems, and kind of like, where do you start with that to start systematizing part of the business?
It's really broken down into 12 systems, right? So, and you're always rebuilding these systems as you move to a different level. So where you're at today and the systems you need in place for today will not be the same systems maybe 3 years from now when you're triple the size, right? And so the first couple systems, like I said, were clarity. You have to know where you're going. The next one is specialize. You have to have some kind of specialization that separates you from everybody else. And then you can start figuring out, how do I attack the market? What's my outbound strategy for business development? What's my inbound strategy for attracting the right prospect and getting the right clients? What should I be charging? How do I make sure I convert, all the people at a high percentage? What should how can I streamline my delivery process and my onboarding of a client? Or who are the right people to hire? Or how do I onboard my clients? Or how do I operate? How do I lead? Those are all the different systems, or automate, right? So you have all these different systems, and everybody's like, crap, man, I got to do 12 systems. And sometimes there's more, but you got to start with the first couple, or just start with one. Literally just say, where do I want to be? What am I creating? Why do I do this? And then who do I want to help? And then all the other stuff starts flowing. And it's all about just creating a process. Going, when I get a client, what needs to happen?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, I've heard other people describe it that way, is like, stop worrying about, your 50 clients and all these numbers, but like, if you have one, who do you want them to be? What experience do you want them to have? And then how do you replicate that over and over again? Like, don't make it too complicated. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like I like the way you put that, because, yeah, when you hear that, 12 systems, that sounds terrifying. But then you start to talk about each and every one and say, okay, if you just had to do that one, like, what would that look like?
Yep. Yeah. And when you have the right systems in place, it really allows you to focus on the stuff you want to do rather than the stuff you have to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like that you start with clarity, because I think that's something that, of all things, should not get lost in this, but it would, just because you're thinking about all these things, and I got to do this in the system, and then the worst thing is, like, you do something for 5 years and you grow, and then you look and you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? So just as we start to wrap this up, I want to focus back on that, because there's a million system things that people can think about, but the one thing they for sure can go away from this interview being a little better with is their clarity. So can you talk through, how do you help people with that, or what do you encourage people to do to think about, what they're trying to build and how to be clear about it?
Well, it takes some time, right? And I can never tell people what their clarity is, because, they're totally different than me. Even if, like, they look like me, talk like me, whatever, they're still different. And so they have to do it. So I always tell people, write down your ideal job. Write down everything that you want to be doing and why. And then write down everything you don't want to be doing and why. And then you start kind of painting a picture. I did this when we were going through some turmoil at our agency. Before I had a lot of systems, we were pretty big at the time, and I just was miserable and hated it. And literally, I almost took a job as like the CMO of NASCAR. And I started filling out the application and doing all that, and it started asking me questions, just like I went over. And then I was like, I hit myself in the head. I was like, idiot, you can build this yourself. And then when I did that and got clarity, the agency just skyrocketed and took off.
Yeah, that I think that makes sense. I think it's very easy to lose clarity in just the day-to-day, and in, serving clients and dealing with bad clients and all this stuff. So I appreciate the way you share that. And all this, I think, is really, really helpful. Just a way to think about your business as a system, and something that you can be clear on and serve the right people and grow. And it works for pretty much any business. So, Jason, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. Where can we get all that good free stuff? I want to get
Yeah. So just go to my website, jasonswenk.com. Swenk is spelled S-W-E-N-K, so jasonswenk.com. If you're an agency, obviously the site's all dedicated for agency owners. If you're not an agency, I still have love for you, and you should definitely go to generateleadseveryday.com. It's generateleadseveryday.com, and it literally walks you through a video of the 5 systems that I use to generate leads on autopilot. So if you want to check that out, go there, and that's my gift to you guys.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jason. We'll definitely check that out, and I'll have links to those in the show notes to send people over. But this has been a lot of fun, a lot to learn. So thanks so much for taking the time.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the TREPX Podcast. For more episodes, interviews, and business growth tools, please visit trepxgroup.com.